Hey everybody, and welcome back to another awesome Ren'Py tutorial video. In this video we're going to look at player inventories and how we can implement them in game. There's different types of inventories that we can do. There is the basic bottomless inventory, which is just a list of items. There's a slightly more complex inventory that would allow you to account for things like weight. And then probably the most difficult of them is the restricted number of slots. So for example, in some games you might have an inventory with only 5 slots. Um, that would be the most complicated implementation of it. Now we're not going to do the really simple list of items because that's really just a simple case of creating a list with names in it. We're going to go on to the next step, which is a semi-bottomless inventory, which we can account for weight and things like that. So the first thing that we need to do is we'll bring up our tutorials with Thundy code like this, and we're not going to make any changes right now. We could remove all of this junk because we don't need it right now, but we'll leave it in there for now, and we're going to go straight to events.rpy. Remember this file where we created all of our classes, and we're going to create a new class. We're going to create a class for items which we can put into our inventory. So class, and we're going to simply call this excuse me, we're going to quickly call this one items, and it inherits from an object. So when we initialize this class, what do we need? Well, we're going to need an item to have a name. We're going to need to have a value. We'll want it to have a weight. And let's think, what else can we possibly have? We don't need to worry about what size it is. And we can put in a placeholder class. We'll just say number owned, just in case we do actually want to keep a track of it in this particular class. But we'll probably do that in the inventory class. So we need to now say self dot name equals name, self dot value equals value. Oh, we may not be able to use value. That looks like it's a keyword. So we'll have to change that to VAL instead of val. There you go. Lesson learned there. Self dot weight equals weight. Self dot number owned equals number owned. Cool. So that's our class for now, which means that we can now create instances of this class which have a name, value, weight, and a number owned. And if you were to create a game with weapons and things like that, you could also add like a attack power, defense, and so on and so forth as values for that. So we've got our items object. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill an array, sorry, a list. So we'll call this is the basic inventory equals inventory dot append items. So its name is going to be none. It's going to have no value, it's going to have no weight, and we're not going to have any owned. So there we go. So now we've actually created a very basic inventory of 50 items, and it's really that simple in terms of this. We don't care about how much things weigh, we don't care about everything, but we can actually go one step further and actually create an inventory class with some methods. Or alternatively, we can put methods in our item class, which is probably a simpler way of doing things for now. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to define add item, and it's going to need its item number. So we'll put self, and we need item number. No, we don't need to actually. We don't need to do that at all. So first thing we want to do is we want to decide what the maximum weight of our inventory is. So we're going to create a new variable called max weight. And let's say the max weight is 50. Like so. So now we're going to say that if, we need to make a loop actually, silly me, for Q in inventory. Oh, good Lord, finger trouble today. For Q in inventory, I should put another, we need to create another variable called current weight. That's going to be 0. For Q in inventory, current weight plus equals Q dot weight. Like so. So now we can say if current weight. Now this, what we're doing, I'm going to explain what I'm doing here. I'm sort of rattling through the code. So I'm saying that the maximum weight of the inventory is 50. The current weight is 0. So then what we do is we loop through all of the items within the inventory list and it adds together the weight like so. If current weight plus self dot weight is greater than the max weight, return. We don't need to return text, we'll just say return for now. So what's going to happen is if you try to add an item to your inventory that will put you over the maximum weight of the inventory, then it won't do it, it will just skip out of it. We could send a message back, but we don't need to. Else, what was I doing? Right, so we need to say self dot, here's something we need to create. We need to create an item number or an ID. We'll just call it ID. This will make life a bit easier, that's all. Self.id equals ID. And the ID will be T. Self.id. So in order to add this, sorry, I've got myself in a muddle here. Right, so we're going to say inventory No, we've done it right. We have done it right. Self dot number owned plus equals 1. So we're going to have to make some changes to our code here because I've got 2 different types of inventory working at the same time here. So our max weight is 50 and our current weight is 0. That is fine. So current weight plus equals q dot weight times q dot number owned, like so. So now what we're saying is that we can populate this with this list with different items, and we can say whatever its weight is times by the number of owned will be added to the current weight. So if current weight plus self weight is more than the maximum weight, then it will simply return. Otherwise, add an item to the list, and that will work. Probably. So now what we need to do is we need to start populating this list with things other than the default values. The ID number never needs to be changed because that's set up right at the beginning. So all we'll ever need to do is to add information into these 4 slots, which we can do in our main file. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this like so, and we're going to go back to our script file where we create variables. So we're going to say inventory 0 equals, and we need it to be items. So we want our first value. Let's just paste that into there. So we're going to call this one a apple, which has a value of 1, has a weight of 1, number of owned is 0, and then obviously the ID will be 0. Right, let's run that just to see if it works. We may have made a typo, we may have done any other number of things. Let's have a look. For Q in inventory. That was my fault. I made a boo-boo in events.rpy. There we go. That's what that loop is supposed to look like. It should now work. Let's have another look. Okay, so it hasn't fallen over. So we know that that's fine. So we'll skip out of that. Yes, cool. So what we're now going to do is we're going to remove some code from all of this. Is just jibber jabber really. So we can get rid of all of that. For now, game running is true while game running called the variables. We're going to remove all of our calendar code from the file just for now, which means we can get rid of those. So at the moment we've set up this and it's not going to do anything else. It's just going to go into an infinite loop. So what we need to do is we're going to create a menu and we're going to simply put in add or not. So add apple. So we need to go back and check our class. So it needs to be inventory 0, which is our apple, add item. Yes, so we need to use a pound sign in front of it because we're in Ren'Py code now. Inventory 0 dot add item. I think that was a capitalized. Well, let's go and double check. Capital I for add item, and then because it's a class method, we need to add our. So now we'll put display inventory. Marvelous. And then what we'll do is we'll create a Python block here. No, we won't. We will not. We'll just put display weight because that'll be a little bit easier for the sake of this demonstration. So we'll simply put new variable WT for weight equals and I think what I need to do is create a new property. Yes, let's do that. So back into our code here, rather than having that there, we're going to create a new property. So if you remember, we can use a decorator property. And then we're going to say define current weight self. And we're going to cut that out, X, and we're going to paste that in here. And then we're going to say call this one current W, like so, and then return current W, like so. And now what we're doing is we are saying if current W, no, we don't need to do that. We've got that now defined. If current weight plus equal, yeah, let's see if that works. Let's see if that works. Let's learn as we go. So in theory, every single item in the in the item class should now have a value, and they should all be the same. We could make that a class method, but I think a property is probably more sensible. So let's say the current weight is inventory 0. It doesn't matter which one we use. Dot current weight. That may not like that. We may have to create a new variable. In fact, let's do it anyway, just because. So we'll say WT equals inventory 0 dot current weight. Like so. Let's see how that works. It may fall over. I may have made a boo-boo somewhere. Add an apple. Okay, current weight is not defined. Coolio. So we know that it's where are we? If current weight self dot current weight. Let's see, that should now fix that because it's a property of the class. Adding apples. Let's see, display weight. Calendar. What the heck is it calling calendar for? Let's have a look. Calendar output. Oh, it's trying to put it on the screen. That's my fault. Silly me. Okay, so we have actually still got some stuff here. In fact, that's a genius idea. Why don't we put that on our top of our screen? There we go. Problem solved, in theory. Add apple display weight 3. There you go. So after a bit of faffing, we'll press this a few more times. And as you can see, it's adding. So if we want to, we could go a little bit further with this, and we're going to complicate things a little more. So we're going to go back to our events class. We've got all of these cool things set up. That's great. So we come into our script and we're going to say display, if I could spell, display number of apples. And then all we need to do is say you have inventory 0 dot number owned apples. And now to make things look a little, so you can see that it's not just printing out the same number. We'll come back up here and we're going to change the weight of our apple. Oh, that's in our script, sorry. The weight of an apple is value weight. So we're going to change this to 2. Now when we run this, we've added 4 or 5 apples. Display the number of apples. You have 4 apples, and as you can see, the weight is 8. Display weight is 8. So as you can see, that works. Now you might be wondering to yourself how the hell you're going to implement this in a game, because this is all well and good printing out these values. But what this little loop here does, all it does is demonstrate that the fact is that you have an inventory and it has stored the number of apples that you have in that class, and it also stored the weight. So you can create new items. You could say inventory 1, the next item in the list, equals items sword. Its value is going to be 100. Its weight's going to be 20. The number owned and its ID is obviously going to be 1. So we'll save that. Like so. Now when we run this, because this will allow us to check that it's not adding more swords than you can possibly hold. So we need to, silly me. So we're going to say create, we're going to copy and paste this. And we're going to say add sword. And we're going to change this to inventory 1, add item. And we don't need to see the number of apples you have anymore. Actually, no, we'll leave that in. We might as well. It's not hurting anyone. We'll copy and paste that. Display the number of swords. There we go. So we've got that in there now. Launch project. Let's have a looky and see what we can do. So we're going to add a few apples. Check how many apples we've got. The weight is now 18 and we have 9 apples. Good. We're going to add a sword. Display a number of swords. We have 1 sword. That's silly me. I forgot to change the text. Oops. But you can see the weight's gone up by 20. Now let's try and add another one. As you can see, didn't like that very much. You have 1 apples. Add a sword. It won't let us add another sword. I can click on that as many times as I like and it won't do it, but I can keep adding some apples. As you can see. So if we come out of there, I know it's saying you have 1 apple, so we'll have a look at that in a second. You have inventory 0 number owned. So what we might have to do is create a temp variable. TMP equals inventory 0 dot owned. TMP, and this just is a good way of checking that your code hasn't gone completely bonkers. In fact, we don't need to do that. We'll just copy that, paste that there. Inventory 1, and then we're going to change that so it says swords. And then when we run it, at least the code, at least the text that appears on the screen will now make sense. Add an apple or 2, add a sword. You have 5 apples. You have 1 swords, and the total weight is 30. So we should now be able to add 1 more sword. The current weight is 50, so we're now at our max weight. So when we say how many swords we've got, 2. How many apples we've got is 5. If we try to add an apple, we can't. We try to add a sword, we can't. So that works. So now we have an inventory with a maximum weight, and we can just add items to it like that. And then if you want to add an item in the game, all you have to do is say inventory and then whatever ID number it is that you're looking to add item, open and close brackets. And that's a really, really basic inventory system. I know the video probably felt a little bit chaotic, but we learn as we go. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.